Well, I want to welcome everybody to the Lukens Historic District. Scott Houston, president of the Graystone Society, and it's really nice to have everyone here tonight to celebrate Nancy Hannum. Particularly want to welcome members and friends and family of the Hannums, Carol and Buzz and Jock, and recognize the family and appreciate everybody for being here. A little bit about the Graystone Society. You know, these are some of the things that we enjoy doing, our programs. We have great facilities and the historic district in Coatesville, and as we look to enliven our programs, you know, Women's History Month and Rebecca have you know, come to the forefront. We do some lectures and fundraisers, but March and Women's History Month is an opportunity to look at our origins and really take the opportunity to look at Rebecca as a person and study her and look at, you know, the life of Rebecca and the accomplishments, and try and develop a program that honors women and accomplishments in modern times. The Rebecca Lukens Committee gets together in September and has open nominations, and so it's truly a democratic process by which we look at candidates from all over Coatesville and Chester County, and it's nice that this year we are able to honor a great legacy in Chester County in Nancy Hannum. The story, you know, of Rebecca is interesting, and that's what I can talk about. And I know that I've talked to many of you as well. I did not know Nancy Hannum, and I did not know Rebecca either. But it's interesting to take some of the parallels and look at the lives of the two women and some of the characteristics that we admire and that make us, you know, look at Nancy and Rebecca and say, you know, how were they successful? They had to be tenacious. They had to be patient. They had to be loyal and caring, and you know, they had to have an intense drive, and they had to have, as well, you know, we can list these qualities. They had to have an intangible asset, you know, something that you really can't put your finger on. And I think that you know, is captured in just the spirit of what, you know, she accomplished and what we're able to gather here today. But I want to welcome Bill Shaw to start out. Give us a little quick prayer to start.
Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we just first of all pause during the course of this event to invite you in, and first of all thank you that in the beginning, when you created us male and female human beings to reflect that full diversity, but that full equality as well. And that mystery is something we still wrestle with and ponder to this day. But God, we thank you for how you've used these two women that we recognize today. And in this event, we thank you for their contributions while they were here with us. And so we recognize this as the birthday of Rebecca Lukens, and thank you for her contribution in so many ways. And God, we thank you for the contribution of Mrs. Hannum, who in her own way and in a unique way has also contributed in such an incredible way to this land and to this community that we, all of us, somehow call home. So God, we thank you for that, and we just ask that you would lead and guide and direct us through the course of this event. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Bill. I guess what we're going to do next is I'll just describe a little bit about Rebecca. Some of you may be familiar with the story, some of you may not. You know, Rebecca was born into the Pennick family in southern Chester County and raised in the Quaker way of education. And then we skipped, you know, forward a couple years, so I won't give you the whole thing. But we, you know, Rebecca grew up in the southern Chester County and fell in love with Dr. Charles Lukens they got married in Philadelphia in the middle of the War of 1812. And they lived in Philadelphia for a little while, but she had grown up in the iron-making family and had known, you know, her way around the works. It's eventually she lures Dr. Charles Lukens back to Rokeby Hollow, and he begins to get invested in the iron-making business. And with his doctoral background, you know, obviously the scientific process of steel and the art of steel making, or iron making at that time, is fascinating. And the two of them leased the farm, Brandywine Mansion, and the Brandywine rolling mill that Isaac had bought. They leased it from him in the early 1800s. And they settle down and try and raise a family, and Charles and Rebecca and the children. But in the 1800s, life is fragile, and within quick succession, Dr. Charles Lukens and Isaac and one of the older sons pass away. So Rebecca's pregnant at 31 and charged with a task of what do I do? Do I fall back into the Quaker social scene and the network and rely on the extended family, or do I continue on with running the mill and taking care of my family in a not so traditional way? She had pressures on her from her mother, who wanted her to retreat back into the social way. And it's a lesson in will and estates for sure that I'll spare you all on. But the mother suing the daughter over property rights are fun times, and then little cousins getting mills in front of people, and Rebecca having to go to the Supreme Court to prove her right to own the mill is a great story that I encourage all of you to just look into, embrace at your own level, and if you're willing to investigate a little more. But it's really a struggle of a woman running an iron mill and doing things that weren't traditional, and how do you negotiate contracts, and how do you fend off suppliers, and you have to be pretty savvy at that. She is very successful at running the mill in its plain and simple way. She doesn't really have pretentious goals, although she does diversify her revenue streams and becomes an industrialist, and runs a family and the mill. So it's a fascinating story. She passes this legacy on to her daughters, and Isabel is the owner of the mill, and she marries a doctor, Dr. Charles Houston, and the legacy then becomes the Lukens Steel Company. So hopefully that's about 60 years of great history in about 10 minutes. There is a lot of things that come, the research and looking into Rebecca's life are very important. So again, I encourage anybody to do that. One person who has taken a lot of time to do that is Susanna Brody, and she has investigated the life of Rebecca and portrays Rebecca, and she is going to take the opportunity to give a little snippet of from Rebecca's autobiography and something she's put together that's appropriate for tonight. So, Susanna, Rebecca.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to see all of you here tonight. When my husband, Dr. Charles Lukens, and I came here to Brandywine Iron Works in 1816, everything was in dilapidated condition about the mill, house, and farm. Dr. Lukens was quite discouraged. Repairs were so much needed and were ruinously expensive. I often told my father, I thought it scarce right that we should have so much to do, that the ironworks should have been put in good working order before we came. But Dr. Lukens invested much money and energy into repairing and refitting the ironworks to roll boilerplate. This was quite risky. It was a whole new branch of the iron industry, but he had high hopes for its success. But those were most difficult times. The high costs of the repairs, the natural disasters, but most of all, the personal losses. In June 1825, I lost my dear and excellent husband and began my long, lonely struggle with life. This parting by death is a sorrowful thing for those that are left behind to mourn the loss of what gave them pleasure in life. I will not dwell on my feelings back then. When I looked around me, there was difficulty and danger on every side. Dr. Lukens had asked me to continue with the ironworks, and I promised to make the attempt. My mother thought, as a female, I was not fit to carry on such a concern. But I respectfully but firmly told her I must make the attempt. I urged the promise I made to my dying husband, the duty I had to my children, and that according to Father's will, the ironworks would be mine in the future. Necessity is a stern taskmistress, and my every want gave me courage. Yet, I must have possessed some energy of character, for I look back on it now and wonder at my daring. So, with great fear, but that little bit of courage, I began to struggle for a livelihood. With my brother-in-law Solomon's help, I have completely rebuilt the ironworks, repaired the mansion house, built substantial tenant houses for my workers, and made improvements to the farm. I have built a superior mill, though a plain one, and our character for rolling boilerplate stands first in the American market. Well, this evening, we are here to honor another woman of courage. And for that, I will return you to Mr. Scott Houston.
Thank you. It's always great to hear from Rebecca, and you can obviously hear the passion that Susanna has in bringing that story to us, and we're very lucky to have her here tonight. You can hear the conviction and the passion and the sacrifice and the loss. It's not all roses. You gotta win some, and you gotta take your losses too. But as I said, I really didn't know Nancy too well, although anybody who drives a Jeep, drove a Jeep around, I'm a fan of that. I have a Jeep 20 years and still keep track of it. I do want to introduce somebody tonight who did know Nancy well, and that's my Vice President, Gene DiOrio of the Graystone Society. Welcome, Gene.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Scott. This is a very special honor and pleasure for me. Of course, we have enjoyed the honor and pleasure of all our awardees. This is the 5th year that we've done the Rebecca Lukens Award. And as Scott has indicated, we set up certain criteria for our committee. And I think we felt that Nancy Hannum met all those quite well. Yes, it was my pleasure to know Mrs. Hannum quite well. Actually, my acquaintance with the Hannum family began with her husband, John. As a young man getting interested in politics, I served as a Republican committeeman in this precinct. And John was chairman of the Chester County Republican Committee. And of course, as I learned early on as a committeeman, you went to a lot of chicken dinners, and you got involved with things, and I got the pleasure of meeting John, who was later, of course, judge. I remember one time we had a function, and I'm really dating myself, but this was back when Bill Scranton Sr. ran for governor, and we had quite a reception at Brooklawn, and I was there, went through a receiving line, and that's when I first had the pleasure of meeting Mrs. Hannum. Well, another acquaintance came through the fox hunting. No, I'm not a hunter. One time I took riding lessons, but with a good question of allergy, with horse dander and hay, I decided God didn't intend you to do this to you. So I contented myself with taking pictures, and I attended a good many meets of the hounds in various parts of the county, and also taking a lot of pictures. Then in 1964, the county commissioners appointed me to the County Park and Recreation Board. And a couple years later, I got selected or elected to be vice chairman. And about a year later, we had a very active chairman who, and of course I took the vice chairman thinking I really wouldn't have anything to do. But our chairman at the time got involved with some controversial issues with the county commissioners, And he, like the thing in Japan, he blew off a lot of steam and quit in a huff. And 2 other members went with him. So suddenly the chairmanship evolved on me, and I thought, oh good Lord, what do I do now? I got to fill the gap. So I was anxious to close the ranks and get new members. Well, the first person I called was Mrs. Hannum, because I was aware of her interest in open space. So happily she came on the board with a couple other people, and we got through it. Mrs. Hannum and I had about 16 years together on the County Park and Recreation Board. And I realized how passionately she was interested in open space. And of course, I also admired the hunt. I dug out a poem which I want to quote to you. One of the things that made me appreciate going to meets. Back in the 19th century, we had a Chester County poet whose name was James Everhart, and he wrote a little book called The Fox Chase. And he quotes, "A scene unique, so passing bright, so glorious to the ear and sight, would thrill the sternest soul that ever carped at grace or joy, and scowled at sport of man or boy, and turned sweet life to dole." Well, I think the hunt really exemplified that. I enjoyed going to the meets because there was definitely an aura of excitement and beauty inherent in the sport, which fits so beautifully with our Chester County countryside. And yes, I went to a lot of meets and enjoyed it all. Some personal reminiscences, which I hope are not out of place. A lot of years ago, I did a book on Chester County, and I did a chapter on the hunt. And of course, I turned to Nancy for help. And she gave me some advices and kindly reviewed a lot of pictures that I was selecting. And I had some real shocks, some pictures that I thought were great. Mother said, "Don't use those, Gene." There was one that I thought was just a great color combination. She said, "Oh, no, the huntsman is not holding on tight. His grip isn't right. Don't use that." Then there was another one of hounds approaching Runnymede, J. Stanley Reeves' place. Of course, Mr. Reeves was quite an expert on the field. I thought it was just great. The hounds are coming. She said, "Gene, those hounds, their tails are up. They look like chow dogs. They can't be Mr. Stewart's hounds." I don't know how many pictures we went through. But Mrs. Hannum she was great to work with. She was always delightful. And of course, she and I served, as I said, 16 years on the County Park Board. And we had she was very serious about it. And of course, somebody talked about the Jeep a moment ago, and I can't resist the Jeep story. I think her Jeep was probably the most famous vehicle in the history of Chester County. Well, during the summer months, we would go to the parks for meetings. Most of our meetings, of course, were held at the county offices in Westchester. The summer months, we would go to the various parks. And Nancy would sometimes come to Coatesville if we were meeting north of Coatesville. And occasionally we'd go to Nottingham, which is in the very southwest quarter below Oxford. So when we did there, I'd go down to Brooklawn and we'd go together. So one night I get to Brooklawn and Nancy said, "We're taking the Jeep tonight." For some reason she insisted on taking the Jeep and also insisted that I drive it. She said, "Gene, it's all gassed up. I even watched it. We're going to take the Jeep." So with some trepidation, but of course Mrs. Hannum wasn't somebody who said no to, I drove and we got down and back. That was a memorable evening. But I grew to appreciate, we had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and she was a great board member. But I did grow to appreciate very deeply her wonderful interest in open space. And I think her accomplishment in keeping that open, not just to keep a place for the Cheshire to hunt, but it was superb, and I think we're all very much in her debt. It reminds me of many years ago touring St. Paul's Cathedral in London, which is a magnificent architectural affair. And if you've seen the pictures of the Second World War when the Germans were bombarding London, the pictures of the dome amid all the smoke and fire gave sort of proof that the British were going to survive. Well, if you tour St. Paul's and go to the basement, the crypt, there are a great many monuments. Some of them are really glorious. Viscount Nelson, the hero of Trafalgar, and the Duke of Wellington. And these monuments are as high as the ceiling. But the architect, Sir Christopher Wren, is buried with a very, very plain little marker. And above it is a plaque with a brass inscription, which his son, who was also Christopher and also an architect, inscribed. And in Latin it says, if I can remember correctly, Se monumentum require circumspecie. If you seek his monument, look about you. And for me, every time I drive down 82 to Longwood or anywhere else, I think of Nancy and the heart and soul work that she put in to preserving the open space. I think that is her greatest monument. So it is with great honor and great pleasure that we, the Graystone Society, have selected her for our annual award. I could go on with a lot of stories. One I have to tell you, because aside from all the board meetings and all the serious events that we had, and yes, Tenacity very definitely was a quality. A couple of years or so ago, I was talking to Nancy, and I don't remember where or what, but she was asking me how I was, and I happened to mention that with advancing years, I was having some arthritic problems. Oh, Gene, I've exactly the thing for you. 2 days later, a package arrives. Carol knows the story. With a couple of tubes of ointment. I wondered if she used these on the horses. I wasn't sure. came a note, Gene, you got to use these. And you know I did, and they were pretty helpful. So on that note, I will conclude, and I think we're now ready to make the official award.
This is the Rebecca Lukens Award. It's placed permanently on the model of Rebecca Lukens' business here in the Executive Office Building, and it reads Nancy Penn Smith Hannum, 2011 Rebecca Lukens Award recipient. So that will be placed here in the lobby. Thank you. And we have a presentation for the Rebecca Lukens Award. Nancy Penn Smith Hannum. Yeah, thank you. We can, yeah, we can go. All right.
So now, we are honored to present this to her daughter, Carol Davidson. So Carol, the podium is yours.
First of all, thank you, Gene, for all those nice words. Second of all, my father always said there's no such thing as a bad short speech. And the speeches seem to be going on a bit here. If any of you want to sit down, I think that might be a more comfortable thing. Because I've got plenty of stair space, and I've got a chair space there. So if anybody would like it, I think we'll all be among friends and be comfortable. But I want to thank Gene very much for all those nice words. I also want to thank you for hanging the picture of my mother on Ivory Tower, which is out in the mantle right there. That mare portrays what my mother and Rebecca exemplified. They all had steel in them. And just as Stephen Vincent Ray said of his heroine in John Brown's body, Mary Lou Wingate was slightly made, but is finely wrought as a rapier blade. My mother, Nancy Penn Smith Hannum, had fox hunting blood dominating both sides of her pedigree for 3 generations back. In fact, both her grandfathers, her father, her mother, her stepfather, and her father-in-law were all masters of foxhounds. Born in 1919 on Long Island, she was the granddaughter of E.H. Harriman, the Wall Street financier and railroad builder. He founded and hunted his own pack of hounds, the Orange County Hounds, in New York. Harriman's daughter, Carol, married Richard Penn Smith, whose father was considered one of the finest judges of quality horses of his era, and had been master of Chester Valley Hunt. Carol and Richard Penn Smith became masters of the Orange County Hounds after E.H. Harriman had relocated them to their present home in Virginia. Both of the Penn Smith's daughters, Nancy and April, hunted with the Orange County from the time we were too young to remember otherwise, except my mother. When Richard Penn Smith died suddenly in 1929 of complications from pneumonia, his widow remarried William Plunkett Stewart, who was the founder and master of Mr. Stewart's Cheshire Foxhound in Unionville, Pennsylvania. The family moved to Unionville in 1930, and Stewart raised his stepdaughter Nancy to succeed him as master in 1940. She married John B. Hannum III, whose father was master of Mr. Stewart's hound, was master of Mr. Hannum's hounds in Delaware County. When Carol and Plunkett Stewart both died in 1948, Nancy Penn Smith Hannum inherited the Cheshire Hounds, and all the early influences of her life were cemented into her destiny. Nancy Hannum was a strong commander, believing in discipline. Hounds definitely felt the sting of the whip. She also knew the importance of praise, making much of her hounds. Her voice was musical and high to cheer them on, and low to command and chastise them. All commands needed to be at their heads. There is no need, she would say, to shout at their sterns. Below is an excerpt from a talk on training hounds that she gave to Unionville school children in 1973. It captures her approach and her matchless ardor. A litter is born, and when they are weaned, they're all put together and brought in the kennel to be fed. You stand at the deep little door with this group of hounds, and you say, "Stand." You point to a particular hound, who up to that point doesn't even know what it is to be named. He's smelling the delicious aroma of feed over the door. But you point to that hound and you call him by name, Admiral, or Magnus, or Minor, or whatever. Or if it's a bitch, Fabulous, or Music. You point right to her, and you look at her, and her eyes look right into your eyes as you call her by name, and you say, "Music, music, music, go in." Then you say, "Go in, go in." And you open the door a little and let music through to the feed. You probably have to take hold of her by the back of her neck and pull her through at first. But in 2 or 3 times, they know their names and they know the commands. Go in and stand. And these are 2 commands that are most important when you go out hunting and reach the first cover. She was totally committed to a proper breeding program. The future of the Cheshire Hounds was always in her head. At church one Sunday, the minister said how impressed he was as she was taking notes on his sermon. Always a lady, she didn't admit that she'd have the hound breeding list in her purse. Planning was spring breeding season. Her approach to actual hunting fluctuated between scientific and mystical. Scent was best when the air was cooler than the ground. Hopefully the barometer would be on the rise, but oh dear God, if the droplets were on the trees. Whatever the science behind it, she knew pendulous droplets meant scent would have no staying power, and hounds would have to be kept right up behind their fogs. She was well known for her diligence in following a hunt to an end, but she always juggled competing claims of the field. It was a hard decision to move on before marking a fox to ground, but she knew the importance of maintaining the enthusiasm in the field. Sometimes it was important to seek fresh ground. She had a few simple rules, which she imparted to me the few times I hunted hounds for her. Her most penetrating observation: if you didn't go one way, you must have gone the other. Was the basis for nearly every tactical decision. After almost every hunt, she wrote down the stream of thinking that led her to urge hounds, wait on them, lift them, push them. She analyzed it all for errors and insights. She continued the practice for the benefit of the huntsman who replaced her after many injuries confined her to her jeep. Below is an excerpt from a 1988 analysis of her hunting that she wrote to Gerald Keel, her huntsman at the time. Actually, in the interest of brevity, I decided maybe I should leave that. So, because Mom was passionate about fox hunting, she was passionate about open space. Any land sale, road widening, trash disposal plan, house siting, zoning matter, or political candidacy that might injure the way of life she cherished, she took a position on it, and a very definite position too. She was fully aware that she could seem unyielding and hectoring. One of her favorite bits of doggerel to recite went, "In controversial matters, my perception is just fine. I always hear both arguments, the one that's wrong and mine." She was just interested in doing what was needed to be done to save the land. Developers were the serpents in the garden, and those who stood with her against the developers who brought threatened parcels of property and held them or refused to sell them their own land to be cut up, quote, just so they can make a bundle, unquote, were her heroes. One hero was Jerry Lenfest, who bought land in the northeast quadrant of the Cheshire hunting country. He didn't start out as a hero. He started out as a heel. He planned to sell off his land for townhouses and a mini mall. Mrs. Hannum wrote him that he was traitorous. Instead of being a heel, why don't you be a hero and protect your land, she demanded. Jerry accepted Mrs. Hannum's wisdom in the end. He aborted his development deals, put his land under easement, gave title to it to a respected conservation organization, and earned a place in history, Mom told him, as a hero whose land will remain open forever. Your mother, he told me, is a very powerful persuader. Many articles have been written about my mother's fixity of purpose. One writer described her as having a potent mixture of vision and tunnel vision, and a charm that could bend spoons. Another said she exercised the power that a person with a cause has over dilettantes. Ian McCord, who designed the plan for the valley to preserve Green Spring Valley, Maryland, described Mom as the informing spirit behind one of the most unique and successful conservation efforts in the nation. She was a hero, just like she thought so many others were. I've always felt her favorite poem by Rudyard Kipling, the one she hung on her grandson's wall, exemplified her. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your term long after they're gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. She retired as Master of Fox Hounds in 2003 after 55 years. Tuesday, March 30th, 2010 was her last day. Her family surrounded her sons Jock and Buzzy, their wives, her daughter Carol, and a granddaughter and namesake Nancy. Her favorite poem, If, was read at her funeral. Thank you all for letting me speak about my mother, and thank you for giving her such a nice award.
Tonight.
It's now my pleasure to introduce some of our other special guests from the world of government, who I believe have special presentations to make this evening. First of all, I understood someone from the county was here. I haven't. Oh, Mr. Costello, would you like to come forward, please?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My colleagues, Terrence Farrell and Kathy Kazone, were not able to be here, but they send their regrets and their well wishes to the Hannum family. And we were able to present a citation here tonight, and I'd like to read that, if you'll indulge me. The Board of Commissioners of Chester County honors the memory of Nancy Penn Smith Hannum on the occasion of the awarding of the Graystone Society's 2011 Rebecca Lukens Award. The Graystone Society's Rebecca Lukens Award honors individuals who exhibit the qualities of resilience, loyalty, caring, practicality, insightfulness, tenacity, resourcefulness, and patience. Mrs. Hannum was a Chester County conservation advocate whose love of the land led to the preservation of tens of thousands of acres of farms, forests, streams, and farms in southern Chester County. In addition to her determination and drive to preserve open space, Mrs. Hannum was a founding board member of the Upland Country Day School, was an inspirational member of the Chester County Parks and Recreation Board, and an active participant in the Westchester University Foundation. The Board of Commissioners, County of Chester, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, recognizes the many contributions made and accomplishments achieved by Mrs. Hannum during her lifetime that have benefited and will continue to benefit the citizens of Chester County for many generations. And it's signed by all three commissioners. And I must also say that I know some of the Hannum family, and they're great people to work with, and certainly they take after their mother and I'm sure their father in terms of the public service and their contribution to the county. It's very nice to be a part of the reception here tonight, and on behalf of the county, congratulations to the Hannum family for this award in remembrance of their mother. Thank you.
I'll do that.
Should we do this real quick? Be real quick with this.
Thank you, Commissioner, for coming this evening. Now, moving up to the state level, we have a presentation from the House of Representatives to be delivered by the Honorable Representative Chris Ross. Thank you.
Sorry for the junior and bringing the more fancy people in later. So, I just wanted to, on behalf of my colleagues in the Pennsylvania House, to thank the Graystone Society and congratulate the Hannum family for this well-deserved award. I had great good luck to know Mrs. Hannum, and I call her Mrs. Hannum. I'm sorry. That's don't think I'd be comfortable saying any other. For quite a few years, and got to know her particularly when she was so busy preserving open space, and I was trying hard in my own small way to be doing that down in London Grove Township, and then got to know her more as a state representative. And as those of you that are in public office know, she would write letters, and she wrote letters fairly frequently. And she had very strong opinions, as I'm sure if Rebecca Lukens was alive when I was a state representative, I would probably get similar kinds of letters from her. We had an excellent arrangement. I did not disagree with her. She did not notice if I didn't do what she told me to do, and we got on swimmingly as a result of that. But I would tell you that every time I saw her, I was just delighted to see her, because she told the best stories. She was the most delightful person. As my wife will attest also, she had the nicest smile, the brightest smile that you ever saw, and it really picked you up through your day when you saw her and got to have a chance to chat with her. I'm so grateful for all that she has done in terms of all the work that she did in the county that's been alluded to already here tonight, and particularly appreciative of the friendship and the kindness that she extended to me personally. And on behalf of the Commonwealth as a whole, I also am tremendously appreciative. And for those lawyers, the documents to follow later. So.
Now, also on the state level, we're honored to have State Senator Andrew Dinniman, who I believe has a whereas to present. Andy?
Good evening.
Evening.
First, let me pay tribute to Gladys and Mary and Jane, previous winners of the award. And Susanna, I'm not sure I can tell the difference between Mrs. Lukens and yourself anymore. And you know, Susanna has done so much to preserve the history of this county that we are grateful for. Mrs. Hannum was an institution in this county. And she was an institution because she represented a certain set of values. A set of values that understood the importance of the land, and a set of values that enabled us, through her tenacity, through her will, to preserve so much of that land. And Jean, you're absolutely right. If we go down Route 82, Mrs. Hannum's monument is the beauty of that highway, not the highway itself, but the land that borders both sides of that. And we, in this generation and in future generations, will be eternally grateful to Nancy Penn Hannum for what she has preserved and for what she has saved in perpetuity. You know, the best way, because I don't need to read these words, you know the words, you know her background. I want to just express the importance of this document, which becomes part of the record of the Commonwealth. The best way we honor someone is to follow what they have done and to make sure that their dream, their hopes, their aspirations are continued. So today, as we read this document, let us rededicate ourselves to the preservation of Chester County. There are 100,000 acres of land, thanks to the Conservancy, thanks to the commissioners over many generations, that have been preserved in perpetuity. And Mrs. Hannum was an essential part of that preservation effort. Because when you preserve the land, you preserve the very soul, the very essence of what it means to be a Chester Countian. And the fox hunt is part of who we are and hopefully will always be. You know, when you think of a person who has departed, their light, their spirit continues. You know, when you go outside tonight, and it'll be a clear night, look up at the stars, because many of those stars died thousands of years ago, but we are only experiencing their light today. And they light our way as we try to understand our current dilemmas and our current needs and what our values should and must be. And I'm convinced that, you know, with the stars, it also allows us a little imagination. So you'll see Mrs. Hannum's light coming down and helping us lead the way, especially the light on the fields and on the horses and on the hounds. But also understand that if you really look up, you'll also see, I bet, you know, all those stars have those designs. I bet you can see the hounds. I bet you can see the horses in that sky. And I bet with a little imagination, as you feel the spirit of Nancy Penn Hannum, you can see the fox hunt itself. And it's with that hope, that aspiration, that dream, that we maintain the most precious thing we have in Chester County. That's our heritage. That's our land. Because if we maintain that, we always will be proud to say, I'm from Chester County. That's what Nancy Hannum taught us, and that's what we must preserve. Thank you so much. Picture. Oh, you know the process better than I do.
Thank you, Senator. Continuing on the state level, I think we have a message from the Governor's office by Evelyn Walker, who worked for the commissioners and now is in the State Department. So we bow and we're delighted.
Coming to this building is very special for me because I worked in this building for 14 years and my office is now the ladies' room. I had the privilege of working with Skip Houston, who I do not see right now. Skip, where are you?
He's back there, yeah.
And it was an interesting time to be in this building, and it's really enjoyed it.
Be nice.
See, I was nice.
We can do something else in that ladies' room.
Skip was right down the hall, and for 14 years I had the pleasure of working with him on different projects, and it was really a very special time. Thanks for that, Skip.
You're on record now.
I know, I am. It's my pleasure tonight to come full circle, as it is, to come back to Coatesville. I now work for Carol Achel, who is the Secretary of State in the Governor's office in the new cabinet. She's the acting secretary until they confirm her. And I'm the Deputy Secretary of Administration and Regulatory Programs. I said to her, could we make it a little longer? But it is a privilege to come back, and it's nice to see Lois and Jane Davidson and Mrs. Flamer. The Hannum family, I'm delighted to be with all of you. John, I see you. I have a letter from the governor, and it's the first event that I've been to that I've been able to read a letter from the governor. So yes, I am going to read it. Greetings. It gives me great pleasure to join with the Graystone Society and the family and friends of the late Nancy Penn Smith Hannum as she is posthumously honored with the Rebecca Lukens Award. As an active community servant, Mrs. Hannum surpassed the highest ideals of citizenship and exemplified a rare caliber of character and leadership. The generosity and sacrifices she so generously and passionately committed to improving the well-being of those in the Coatesville area and our entire Commonwealth have made a positive difference in the lives of countless citizens. Her commitment to excellence in service to her community is an inspiration to everyone who is touched by her efforts. Her legacy lives on through her family, friends, and neighbors, and will continue to serve as an example to generations to come. It is my hope that her dedication to our Commonwealth's most vulnerable citizens will inspire others to continue her work, and that her memory will live on in the good works of the citizens of Coatesville. As governor, and on behalf of all Pennsylvanians, I am honored to take this opportunity to extend my admiration and gratitude for the notable service of Mrs. Hannum and to honor this remarkable woman's 90 years of purpose-filled life. And it's signed Tom Corbett, Governor. As I trip over that, Sam, I didn't knock it over today. Thank you. And I no longer have to write to them.
Thank you, Ellen. Well, we also have a word from the federal government. Our Congressman Joseph Pitts couldn't be here, but Bob Kane is here, I believe, to present good words from his office. Bob, please. What's the wire?
This is quite an enjoyable evening, and congratulations. Congratulations. Of course, Joe is down in Washington, and that's where he should be. So good evening, and Congressman Joe Pitts sends his warm greetings to the Hannum family, members of the Graystone Society, and to the friends of Mrs. Hannum. Tonight we honor Chester County icon Nancy Penn Smith Hannum, better known as Mrs. Hammond, with the cherished Rebecca Lukens Award. Mrs. Hannum loved her family, community, had a passion for conservation, and took over the mastership of Mr. Stewart's Cheshire Foxhounds from her stepfather, Eddiston. Mrs. Hannum made a difference with everyone she touched. It has been my honor to have had her as my constituent in the 16th Congressional District. She will be missed, but all her legacy will live on. At this time, I would like to present you with a citation for Congressman Joe Pitts.
Thank you, Bob, and thanks to Congressman for presenting that. We are happy to honor all of our previous awardees. Unfortunately, our number 3 awardee, Barbara Travellini, couldn't be with us this evening. She is recovering from a very serious bout of pneumonia, and we all have her in our thoughts and prayers. That concludes our formal program. Mr. President, do you want to say a few final words?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. It's great to see so many people and honoring Mrs. Hannum. And the one story that I have is the fox hunting. I heard my first fox hunt before I saw it, and the music of the mill and the music of a fox hunt, may they continue to ring in Chester County forever. So thank you very much for coming tonight and making this such a special night. So thank you again.